There is something peaceful about a garage at night. The world outside grows still. The hum of traffic fades. The air settles. But inside, the mind remains awake, alive with possibility. In one such garage on Chris Drive in Los Altos, California, a light burned long past midnight. It was the spring of 1976. The walls were lined with tools. A soldering iron rested on a cluttered bench. Wires snaked across the floor like roots searching for earth. And at the heart of it all, two young men, barefoot, focused, and dreaming. One was Steve Jobs, sharp eyes, a restless energy. He spoke in visions, metaphors, and possibilities. The other was Steve Wozniak, gentle, warm, full of laughter. His hands moved with purpose, shaping circuits like a sculptor with clay. Together, they were building a computer, not a machine like the others, towering and cold, locked away in universities and corporations. No, this one was small, personal, a device for the curious, the creative, the everyday dreamer. They called it the Apple One. The name was strange, soft, organic. In a world of hard edges and acronyms, Apple felt like a whisper, like something you could hold or taste or plant in the ground. Why Apple? Some said it was Jobs' fruitarian diet, simple, pure. Others said it was a tribute to Newton, to discovery. But perhaps more than anything, it just felt right. Simple, friendly, human. Wozniak designed the motherboard. It was elegant in its logic, clean, efficient. Jobs pushed for a design that spoke, not just to engineers but to people. They worked long hours, fueled by tea and tofu and dreams. They sold what they could to fund it. Jobs traded in his Volkswagen van. Wozniak gave up his beloved HP calculator. Not for profit, not yet, but for belief. They showed the Apple I at the Homebrew Computer Club, a gathering of minds and misfits. People stared, asked questions, tilted their heads. A few saw the future. Most just saw a board and wires. But the dream had taken root. Jobs convinced a local computer store, the Byte Shop, to order 50 units. They scrambled to build them by hand in batches on wooden tables. Each one was a quiet revolution. Soon, Apple was not just a hobby. It was a company. Jobs, Wozniak, and a small team incorporated Apple Computer on April 1, 1976. April Fool's Day. Fitting, perhaps, because what could be more foolish than believing you could change the world from a garage? But they did, and they were just getting started. The Apple I sparked interest, but it was just that, a spark. Jobs wanted a flame. He wanted something that felt finished, whole, not just a board but a product, something you could unwrap, place on your desk, and fall in love with. Wozniak built the insides. Jobs obsessed over the outside. Plastic casing, integrated keyboard, color graphics. They called it the Apple II. When it launched, it didn't look like other machines. It looked friendly, inviting, something that belonged in a home, not just a lab. And the world noticed. The Apple II became one of the first mass-market personal computers. People bought it for their homes, their kids, their classrooms. They used it to write, to calculate, to play. It was simple, elegant, useful. And Apple began to grow, fast. Employees were hired. Offices were rented. Investors gathered around. And yet, through it all, that same garage spirit lingered. The spirit of possibility, of defiance, of building something different. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Jobs believed design was not just about how something looked. It was about how it worked, how it made you feel. Every corner, every button, every box. He wanted it all to feel intentional, thoughtful, beautiful. He hired not just engineers but artists, not just programmers but poets of logic. The company grew, but Jobs grew restless. He wanted more than success. He wanted impact. He dreamed of a machine that could talk to you, that could greet you, that could say, simply, hello. That machine would be the Macintosh. Jobs was never satisfied with what already existed. He wanted to create something that felt alive, a computer that didn't just function but invited, one that smiled when you turned it on, one that said, You belong here. And so the Macintosh was born. The road to the Mac was not smooth. It was chaotic, demanding, emotional. Jobs pushed people. He pushed hard. Deadlines were tight. Tempers flared. Tears were shed. But underneath the tension, something beautiful was forming. The Macintosh team was different. They called themselves pirates. They flew a flag with a skull and crossbones above their office. They believed they weren't just building a product, they were starting a revolution. In January of 1984, it arrived. The unveiling of the Macintosh was like a scene from a play. Lights dimmed. The crowd leaned forward. The screen lit up. And then the machine spoke. "Hello, a Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag." The audience erupted. The world changed. The Macintosh introduced a new kind of interface: windows, icons, a mouse. It was intuitive, visual, friendly. It didn't require deep knowledge of programming. You could click. You could drag. You could feel your way through it. It was more than a computer. It was an experience. But beauty has a price. The Mac was expensive. And Jobs, ever the perfectionist, often clashed with colleagues and leadership. His energy, while visionary, could be difficult to contain. In 1985, the unthinkable happened. Steve Jobs was pushed out of Apple, the company he had helped create, the dream he had poured himself into. He was 30 years old. And just like that, the boy who had lit the match was forced to walk away from the fire. Apple moved on without him. For a while, it did well. But slowly, the spark began to fade. The company grew, tried new things. Some worked. Many didn't. The magic was fading. But Jobs didn't stop dreaming. He started a new company next. He poured his ideas into a sleek black cube of a computer, one that few bought, but many admired. He also bought a small animation studio from George Lucas and gave it a new name: Pixar. While Apple wandered, Jobs was building stories, both digital and human. Then, in 1996, something unexpected happened. Apple was struggling. Sales were falling. The company was drifting. And so, they reached back into their own past. They brought Steve Jobs home. He returned older, perhaps wiser, but with the same burning belief that technology should be both powerful and personal. That computers should not be cold machines, but companions, crafted with care. His first task wasn't to invent something new. It was to simplify, to focus. He cut products, streamlined the company, and then, in 1998, unveiled the iMac. It was bold, bright, transparent. A computer that didn't hide its parts, it celebrated them. Came in colors: Bondi blue, strawberry, tangerine. It looked more like a toy than a tool. People loved it. It wasn't just the design. It was the feeling. You plugged it in, and it worked. No mess, no manuals, just connection. It was fun. And that, in itself, was revolutionary. From there, Apple found its rhythm again. And Jobs? He was just getting started. In 2001, something small and white slipped quietly into people's pockets. It was the iPod. 1,000 songs, Jobs said, in your pocket. Before the iPod, music was scattered on CDs, cassettes, shelves. The iPod didn't just store music. It gathered it, cradled it, made it portable and personal. Its design was clean. A click wheel, a screen, a silver back that caught the light just so. It felt solid in the hand, like a stone smoothed by time. It felt inevitable, like it had always been waiting to exist. But the iPod was only part of a larger vision. Alongside it came iTunes, a digital library for your music, and later, the iTunes Store, a place to buy songs. Legally, easily, instantly. Apple wasn't just making devices. It was making ecosystems. And people noticed. Slowly, quietly, a transformation was happening. Apple was no longer just a computer company. It was becoming something more, something that connected creativity, communication, and culture. Then, in 2007, came the moment that would change the world. Jobs stepped onto the stage in his black turtleneck and jeans. The room held its breath. "Today," he said, "Apple is going to reinvent the phone." And he did. The iPhone was not just a phone. It was a camera, a music player, a map, a web browser, a canvas, a companion. It was made of glass and steel. It was elegant, responsive, alive to the touch. No keyboard, just a screen. No stylus, just your fingers. It wasn't just a product, it was a portal. The iPhone didn't shout. It whispered. It invited you to swipe, to tap, to explore. Placed the world in your hand. And the world responded. Lines formed. People waited. Reviewers gasped. And Apple became, once again, not just a company but a movement. Over the next years, the iPhone would evolve. It would get faster, smarter, slimmer. It would learn your face, your voice, your habits. It would become not just a tool you used, but a part of who you were. And yet, beneath all the glass and code, there remained something soft, something human. The idea that technology should serve the heart as well as the mind. That it should be joyful, gentle, simple. Apple launched the App Store, giving developers the chance to create magic of their own. Apps for drawing, for sleeping, for learning, for playing. A universe of tools, each one tucked inside your pocket. The iPhone led to the iPad, a tablet that felt like holding the future. Then came Apple Watch, AirPods, Apple Music, Apple TV. One by one, the pieces connected, like stars in a quiet sky, forming constellations. But amid all the brightness, there was also sorrow. In 2011, Steve Jobs passed away. The boy in the garage, the dreamer, the rebel, the artist of the possible. He left behind more than products. He left behind a philosophy that design is not just how something looks, but how it works. That simplicity is strength. That caring deeply, even about the tiniest details, can change everything. Today, Apple continues to grow. Its devices sit in palms, on wrists, in homes. Its stores shine like glass lanterns in cities around the world. Its logo, a bitten apple, remains one of the most recognized symbols on Earth. But Apple is not just about the products it makes. It is about the way it makes them. With care, with clarity, with belief. Belief that a computer should feel as natural as a notebook. That a phone should feel like a friend. That technology, when crafted with thought and intention, can soften the hard edges of modern life. That belief lives on in every rounded corner, every sound design, every soft vibration of a notification. It lives on in the silence between notes when you listen to music, in the way your device dims gently before bedtime, in the ease with which you FaceTime someone you love. It lives on because it was built in, not just programmed. It was placed there by people, dreamers, designers, engineers, artists, each one shaping the future, quietly, with pixels and passion. And if you listen, if you truly slow down, you might still hear it. The hum of a soldering iron in a garage, the soft clatter of keys, the echo of two friends in the night, dreaming aloud about what might be possible. You might hear a young man say, "Let's build something for people, not for business, not for power, but for people." You might see him barefoot on a stage, holding up a thin rectangle of glass and saying, "This changes everything." And you might feel, just for a moment, that spark again. That strange, soft wonder. That maybe, just maybe, the world is still being shaped by quiet rooms and bold hearts. So tonight, as you close your eyes, let the light of that little apple glow gently in your thoughts. Let it remind you that great things can come from small places. That garages can grow into galaxies. That simplicity is not weakness, but wisdom. And that somewhere, someone is still dreaming, still drawing, still building. So sleep well, digital dreamer. The story continues. Far from the warmth of California garages, under the quiet, rainy skies of Seattle, a different kind of story was taking shape. It wasn't born from design or hardware or color. It was born from logic and code, and a deep belief that software, the invisible language of computers, could shape the world just as powerfully as any machine. It was the mid-1970s. In a modest dorm room at Harvard, a boy named Bill Gates stared at the pages of a magazine, Popular Electronics. On the cover, the Altair 8800, a boxy, blinking machine that was among the first of its kind. Personal computer. Gates saw more than metal and lights. He saw a future that hadn't yet been written. A future that needed code. He called his childhood friend Paul Allen. Quiet, thoughtful, with a beard and a calmness that balanced Gates' intensity. Together, they shared a vision not of selling machines but of giving them minds. They reached out to the creators of the Altair. They promised something bold, a programming language designed just for the Altair so users could actually do something with it. There was only one catch. They hadn't written it yet, but they did. In a flurry of long nights and takeout food, they wrote it on paper by hand without even an Altair to test it on. When Paul Allen flew to Albuquerque to demonstrate it, it worked the first time. And just like that, a new company was born. They called it Microsoft, a blend of microcomputers and software. Later, the hyphen would disappear, but the vision remained. Microsoft would not build computers. It would teach them to think. In those early days, the company was small, just a few young minds working in a tiny office in New Mexico. The air smelled like carpet and ambition. They wrote code, tested, refined, released, again and again. They believed software should be standard, stable, scalable. They believed it should be separate from hardware, not tied to any one machine but ready to run on many. It was a radical idea. Most hardware companies wrote their own code. Gates and Allen wanted to change that. They wanted software to become its own industry, and slowly the world began to listen. In 1980, IBM, one of the largest technology companies in the world, came knocking. They were building a personal computer. They needed an operating system. Gates agreed to provide it. But again, there was a catch. Microsoft didn't have one. So they licensed one from another company, adapted it quickly, and named it MS-DOS. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't beautiful. But it worked. MS-DOS became the backbone of the IBM PC, and soon of clones and compatibles all over the world. Microsoft didn't just sell it once. They licensed it over and over to every manufacturer who built IBM-compatible machines. The strategy was brilliant. While other companies fought over hardware, Microsoft quietly embedded itself into everything. And as the number of computers grew, so did Microsoft's reach. By the mid-1980s, a new chapter began. Microsoft introduced Windows, a graphical interface layered over MS-DOS. It had icons, folders, drop-down menus. A mouse moved a cursor across the screen. Felt new but also familiar. Not as polished as the Macintosh, but more open, more flexible. And it worked on the computers people already had. Over time, Windows evolved. It grew smoother, smarter, stronger. By the early 1990s, it was everywhere. And so was Microsoft. By 1995, Windows had become a household name. With the release of Windows 95, the world took notice in a new way. It wasn't just an upgrade, it was a moment. Lines formed outside electronic stores. Commercials played with the Rolling Stones, "Start Me Up." A new era had begun. The interface was smoother, more visual. The start button glowed like a beacon. For millions of people, this was their first step into the digital world. A first click, a first window. Alongside it came the rise of Microsoft Office, a bundle of tools that became as essential as pens and notebooks once were. Word, for writing letters, papers, poems. Excel, for charts and numbers, budgets and data. PowerPoint, for sharing ideas with color and movement. Together, they became the quiet instruments of a new kind of work. Office wasn't flashy. It didn't demand attention. Simply did its job, and it did it well. Microsoft wasn't trying to be artistic or emotional or poetic. It was trying to be useful. And in that usefulness, there was a kind of beauty. By the late 1990s, Microsoft had become more than a company. It was a force. Its products were everywhere, in homes, in schools, in offices, in governments. Its logo, four colored squares, became a symbol of structure, of order, of logic. Bill Gates, the once curious boy from Seattle, was now the richest man in the world. But his curiosity hadn't faded, nor had his vision. He believed computers would be in every home, in every hand. That software would become the invisible architecture of modern life. And much of that dream had come true. But no empire grows without challenge. As Microsoft's power increased, so did scrutiny. In 1998, the United States government filed an antitrust lawsuit. They said Microsoft had grown too large, too dominant, that it had used its power unfairly. The courtroom became a new kind of battlefield. Lawyers replaced engineers. Testimony replaced code. For a moment, the shine dimmed, but Microsoft endured. It adjusted, restructured, and looked to the future. In 2000, Bill Gates stepped down as CEO, handing the reins to Steve Ballmer, a longtime friend and colleague. Gates shifted his focus, first to technology strategy, then to something deeper, philanthropy. He believed that with great power came great responsibility. Through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he turned his attention to vaccines, education, clean water. He traded stock charts for world maps, operating systems for operating change. And Microsoft moved forward. It built new tools, new platforms. It expanded into gaming with the launch of the Xbox. It explored phones, tablets, the cloud. It didn't always get things right. Some products faltered. Others never took flight. But through it all, the heart of Microsoft remained. A belief in the power of software to shape the world. Not with flash, but with function. Not with flair, but with focus. And always with code. In the 2000s, the world moved faster. The internet no longer whispered, it roared. Phones grew smarter. Screens multiplied. People began carrying technology in their pockets, wearing it on their wrists, sleeping beside it at night. And Microsoft, once the king of the desktop, found itself in unfamiliar waters. Competitors rose. Apple, reborn under Steve Jobs, brought elegance and emotion back to the world of technology. Google emerged as the gatekeeper of information. Facebook redefined connection. For a moment, Microsoft seemed quiet, but not asleep. Inside its offices, innovation still stirred. Teams experimented. Engineers built. Leaders adapted. In 2012, a bold new face appeared. Windows 8. Touch-friendly. Tile-based. A break from the familiar. Some embraced it. Others hesitated. Microsoft was trying to find its voice again. Not in a world of keyboards and mice, but in a world of gestures and swipes. It wasn't always smooth, but growth rarely is. In 2014, a new CEO stepped forward. Satya Nadella. Soft-spoken. Thoughtful. He didn't come in with fireworks. He came in with focus. His message was simple. Microsoft would rediscover its soul, not through dominance, but through empowerment. Our mission, he said, is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Under his leadership, the company shifted again. Toward the cloud, toward collaboration, toward listening more than shouting. Azure grew, an invisible sky of computation. Microsoft Teams emerged, bringing people together with quiet efficiency. LinkedIn joined the family, connecting professionals across borders. Windows remained, but it was no longer the center. Now, Microsoft stretched across devices, across platforms, across lives. And the tone changed. It wasn't about being the biggest or the loudest. It was about being there behind the scenes. Quiet, steady, useful. The world had changed, and Microsoft had changed with it. But through all the shifting winds, one thread remained. Code. Thousands, millions of lines of it. Written by people who believed in patterns and clarity and logic. Written to help a farmer track rainfall. To help a teacher grade papers. To help a child learn to type. To help a grandmother send her very first email. The tools were never just tools. They were bridges. And Microsoft was one of the first builders of this vast, digital landscape we now call home. Today, Microsoft is many things. It is a cloud, console, a collection of apps, of tools, of platforms. It is a partner to teachers and doctors, to designers and developers. It is a quiet presence in billions of lives, offering spreadsheets, calendars, emails, memories. It does not demand attention. It simply shows up, quietly, when needed. A Word document waiting to be filled. A Teams call connecting voices across oceans. An Outlook reminder for a meeting you forgot you scheduled. It has grown, softened, evolved. And yet, deep beneath the layers of updates and versions and logos, its essence remains the same. It began with two boys, Bill and Paul, who believed that software was not just technical but transformative. That computers were not just machines but extensions of thought. That code was not cold but capable of carrying warmth. Because behind every program, there is a person. Someone who wrote it. Someone who needs it. Someone who opens a file not to impress, but to express. To balance a budget. To write a story. To dream. And that is what Microsoft became, not just a business but a bridge. Between people and possibilities. Between logic and creativity. Between today and tomorrow. It did not always shine. It did not always soar. But it endured. And in that endurance it became something rare. Familiar. Steady. Trusted. So now, as you close your eyes, let yourself drift. Not into ones and zeros, but into the gentle rhythm behind them. Imagine a soft rain falling on Seattle pavement. The glow of a screen in a quiet room. The sound of typing light and rhythmic. Late into the night. The silent pulse of innovation. Still moving. Still building. Think of a simple line of code, written decades ago, that still lives quietly beneath the surface of what we use today. Think of a small dorm room, a shared dream, and a whisper of possibility that grew into something vast. Sleep well, digital dreamer. The world is still being written, and somewhere someone is still typing. It began not in a garage this time, but in a dorm room. The year was 1996. The place was Stanford University. And two PhD students, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, were working on a question that was as old as humanity itself. How do we make sense of the world? The world, in their case, was the internet. A swirling, ever-growing ocean of pages, links, documents, fragments. A universe of information with no center, no structure, no order. At the time, search engines already existed, but they were clunky, incomplete, easily fooled. You typed in a word and you got something, but it wasn't always what you needed. Larry and Sergey thought there had to be a better way. They began with a simple idea. Links mattered. If one page linked to another, it was like a vote, a signal, and some votes carried more weight than others. They built a system that didn't just count words, it read the relationships between pages. They called it Backrub at first, but eventually the name changed. A play on the word Google, a 1 followed by 100 zeros, a number so big, it stretched the imagination. They called it Google, and it did something magical. You typed in a word, any word, and within seconds the most relevant pages rose to the top. It didn't feel like search, it felt like knowing. Google was clean. A white page, a single box, no clutter, no distractions, just a space to ask. And when you asked, it answered. Quietly, instantly, almost spiritually. As more people used it, it got smarter. As it got smarter, more people used it. And soon, the dorm room wasn't big enough. They moved into a garage. This time, it belonged to Susan Wojcicki, a friend who would later become part of Google's story in her own right. The company grew. It hired engineers, linguists, designers. It built servers out of Lego bricks. It handed out t-shirts. It encouraged biking to work. It created a culture of curiosity and caffeine. Its mission was simple, bold, and beautiful: to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Not just some information, all of it. Not just for some people, for everyone. Not just accessible, useful. And slowly, the dream became real. People began to rely on Google not just to search but to understand, to settle debates, to answer late-night questions, to learn, to explore, to wonder. And behind that simple box, magic was happening. Algorithms danced, servers hummed, data flowed like water. It was quiet, invisible, powerful. Google became the heartbeat of the web. As the 2000s began, Google quietly became a verb. To Google was no longer just to search. It was to seek, to know, to reach across space and time and pluck an answer from the digital ether. Felt effortless, magical. But behind the curtain, An empire was rising. Google moved into its first proper campus, a cluster of buildings it called the Googleplex. There were lava lamps and snack bars, whiteboards covered in equations. Dogs roamed the halls. Ideas flew faster than emails. The company's culture was playful, but focused. "Don't be evil," said its early motto. Simple, bold, aspirational. And while others competed for dominance, Google pursued something different: relevance. Search improved. Autocomplete began finishing your thoughts. Spellcheck caught your errors gently. The answers came faster and closer to what you really meant. But search was just the beginning. Soon, Google Maps arrived, turning abstract directions into visual journeys. You could see your street, zoom into your city, chart a route across continents. It was not just useful. It was grounding. It made the world feel smaller and more knowable. Then came Gmail. Launched quietly on April Fool's Day in 2004, people thought it was a joke. 1 gigabyte of storage? Unheard of. But it wasn't a prank. It was a promise that your information could live in the cloud, accessible from anywhere, forever. Documents, spreadsheets, presentations. Google began replacing the desktop with the browser. And as more people spent time inside that browser, Google offered them windows into news, images, videos, and more. YouTube joined the family. What began as a site for sharing clips became the largest video library in human history. A place where tutorials met lullabies, where comedy met commentary, where voices that had once been silent found their stage. Then came Android. Google saw the mobile wave rising, and instead of resisting, it embraced it. Android wasn't just a phone system. It was a platform open and adaptable. A garden where developers could plant and users could roam. Millions of phones, billions of devices, and always Google was there, quietly indexing, gently guiding, learning more so it could serve better. It wasn't loud. It wasn't boastful. It simply worked. As Google grew, the world around it changed. Search became second nature. Maps became muscle memory. Email became air. And Google became something more than a company. It became a lens, a way to see the world, to move through it, to remember it, to ask questions and receive answers not just typed, but spoken. "Hey Google," 2 simple words, a whisper to the cloud. Suddenly your phone replied, or your watch, or a small speaker on the kitchen counter. You asked for the weather, the time, a recipe, and the voice answered warm, neutral, always ready. Google had become a companion. Behind the voice were layers of intelligence, algorithms, neural networks, deep learning systems, machines that could translate, recognize, predict, not just react but anticipate. Search was no longer a destination. It was a constant thread woven into daily life. You didn't visit Google anymore. You carried it with you, in your pocket, in your home, in your car. With your consent, it learned what routes you took, what songs you liked, what you searched late at night when no one else was around. And it remembered not to judge but to help. It filled in your calendar, suggested a reply, reminded you to breathe, to stand, to leave on time. This was no longer just about information. It was about you, your preferences, your patterns, your needs. Some found this comforting, others unsettling. But Google remained, at its core, a servant to the same goal: to make the world's information useful. It didn't promise perfection, but it promised context. And increasingly, it delivered. Then came artificial intelligence. No longer the stuff of science fiction, AI became a real and present force, quietly shaping search results, powering recommendations, coloring every product with a touch of personalization. Google's AI didn't shout. It listened. It adapted. It learned from billions of queries, not to sell but to understand. And in that understanding, it tried to serve. Gently, seamlessly, invisibly. Not magic, but something close. Today, Google is everywhere and nowhere. It's not just on your screen. It is your screen. The colors of its logo glow faintly in your memory. The rhythm of typing in a search bar feels like breathing. The silence after pressing enter feels like opening a door. It has become a background presence, a soft echo behind a million small tasks. You open your phone and it is there. You land in a new country and it is there. You speak and it listens. You wonder and it answers. But Google is no longer just a search engine. It is a map, a translator, a guide, a curator, a creator. It finishes your sentences, corrects your spelling. It remembers what you forgot and forgets what you ask it to. And while the world debates the nature of data and privacy and power, Google continues to evolve. Not loudly, not suddenly, but continuously. It builds tools, refines its models, gathers insights from the world, and then tries to give them back. In charts, in graphs, in weather updates, in suggested articles, in stories that unfold before your eyes, one tap at a time. And yet, at its heart, it remains simple. A blank page, a blinking cursor, an invitation to ask. The same invitation Larry and Sergey dreamed of all those years ago. To bring order to chaos, to bring structure to questions, to bring information to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And tonight, as you close your eyes, know this: there is still a server somewhere, humming softly in the dark. There is still an algorithm, learning how to serve you better. There is still a spark of wonder in every search bar. Because Google is not just about knowledge. It is about seeking. And seeking is what makes us human. So rest easy, digital dreamer. The answers can wait. Let the world's information spin gently on its own. You've asked enough questions for today. Before it became a marketplace for everything, before the cardboard smile filled doorways and porches across the world, Amazon was a small idea, and it began with books. The year was 1994. In a rented house in Bellevue, Washington, a man named Jeff Bezos sat at a desk, writing lists. Books, thousands of them. Titles, authors, categories. He was building not a bookstore, but a catalog of possibility. The internet, still young and mysterious, had shown one clear trend. It was growing. Fast. Too fast to ignore. Bezos called it the regret minimization framework. He imagined himself at the age of 80 looking back. Would he regret not trying? Not chasing the biggest idea of his life? He left his job, packed a car, drove cross-country with his wife, Mackenzie, and started Amazon. Not in a warehouse, not in a sleek office, but in a garage, like Apple, like Google. Another quiet beginning. The name came from the river, vast, wild, the largest in the world. He wanted something that felt expansive, boundless. The early site was simple, white, text-heavy. You could browse, click, read reviews, place an order, and wait. A brown box would arrive days later, a book inside. But not just paper and ink, something more. A sense that the future had come to your doorstep. Amazon didn't just sell books. It changed the way people thought about buying. It showed that convenience wasn't a luxury. It was a promise. The company grew. More books, more titles, then music, then movies. Slowly, quietly, it expanded. People began to trust it, not just with money, but with time. Because Amazon delivered. Behind the scenes, Bezos was building something deeper. He believed in systems, in scalability, in efficiency. He didn't just want to sell books. He wanted to build the rails of a new kind of commerce. Warehouses became fulfillment centers. Inventory became data. Delivery became precision. And always, behind the algorithms and boxes, was a simple question. How can we make this easier? As the 2000s began, Amazon was no longer just about books. It became a store that sold almost everything, from garden tools to kitchen gadgets, pet food to electronics. People began to realize, if you needed something, Amazon probably had it. But Bezos wasn't building a store. He was building infrastructure, invisible, vast, and flexible. He wanted to make it easy, not just for Amazon to sell, but for anyone to sell. The result was a quiet revolution. the marketplace. Small sellers, artists, resellers, all could use Amazon's platform to reach millions. It wasn't just about products anymore. It was about possibility. Amazon took care of the hard parts. Shipping, payment, returns. All you had to do was show up, and people did. Soon, millions of independent sellers joined the platform. A global bazaar, organized, efficient, algorithmically tuned. But Bezos saw even further. He noticed something inside Amazon's own systems. They had built powerful computing infrastructure, servers, storage, bandwidth that kept the whole machine running. What if other people could use that too? And so, quietly, without fanfare, Amazon launched AWS, Amazon Web Services. First, few noticed, but it was the beginning of a new kind of empire. Not made of shelves, but of servers. Not delivering boxes, but computing power. AWS became the foundation for startups, governments, schools, banks. It was the silent spine of the internet, powering apps, services, websites, clouds. Amazon wasn't just in your home anymore. It was in your code, in your data, in your infrastructure. It became everywhere. And always, Bezos returned to the same question. How do we delight the customer? That meant speed. That meant trust. That meant showing you the product you didn't know you needed before you even searched for it. And so, Amazon refined its algorithms. Its warehouses grew closer. Its delivery faster. Its prices sharper. 2-day shipping became 1 day. Then same day. The smile on the box became not just branding, but a signal. This arrived because someone, somewhere, figured out how to make it happen. And behind that smile were engineers, logisticians, robots, data scientists, packers, drivers, a symphony of invisible movement so that what you wanted could appear almost like magic. But it wasn't magic. It was scale. It was systems. And it was vision. As Amazon grew outward into new categories, new services, new geographies, it also grew inward, into the home. With the launch of Kindle, Amazon returned to its roots. Books. But this time without paper. The Kindle wasn't just an e-reader. It was a library in your hand. Thousands of books. Zero weight. Infinite stories. A screen that felt like paper. A page that turned with a tap. It changed how people read. You no longer had to go to the bookstore. The bookstore came to you. You didn't need to wait, or carry, or remember where you stopped. The book remembered for you. The Kindle wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, deliberate, thoughtful, and it fit perfectly into Amazon's mission. Make it easier. From there, the company stepped even further inside, into kitchens and bedrooms, offices and living rooms. It gave the world Alexa, a voice. Calm, neutral, always listening. Alexa didn't need a screen. It needed only your words. You could ask about the weather, set a timer, play music, order batteries, and Alexa would respond. Not with emotion, not with noise, but with clarity. Behind the voice was something deeper: artificial intelligence, natural language processing, the ability to understand intention. And slowly people adjusted. Talking to machines no longer felt strange, felt natural. You could whisper, "Good night," and the lights would dim. You could say, "Good morning," and the world would respond. And behind that whisper, a web of services danced. Calendars, reminders, shopping lists, routines. Amazon had not just entered the home. It had settled in, like a butler, like a librarian, like a guide, but always silent. Always efficient, and always there. Today, Amazon is many things. A store, a cloud, a voice, a network of warehouses and wires, of data centers and delivery vans. It is a place where you shop, yes, but also where you read, where you listen, where you ask. It recommends. It remembers. It arrives when you expect it, sometimes before. But Amazon is not just a business. It is an architecture. A quiet choreography of algorithms, logistics, and belief. Belief that convenience matters, that time is precious, that systems, when built with care, can make the world feel just a little bit softer. Not every choice was perfect. Not every step was smooth. Amazon has faced its share of questions about workers, about competition, about scale. But one thing has remained true. It is built to serve. Not with charm, not with beauty, but with precision. And there's a kind of elegance in that. An elegance in knowing that when you click, something happens. That when you speak, something listens. That somewhere, perhaps far away, perhaps just down the street, someone is packing a box, scanning a label, placing your hope into a vehicle, so that it might find you, and maybe, in some small way, make your day easier. That's what Amazon became. Not everything to everyone, but everything to someone at just the right time. And tonight, as you close your eyes, you might hear it. Not the sound of a truck or a scanner or a voice assistant, but the quiet hum of possibility, the soft movement of systems in motion, of fulfillment centers blinking through the night, of distant servers holding your lists, your preferences, your memories. The world ordered, not perfectly, but purposefully. So sleep well, digital dreamer. You've ordered enough for today. Let the world deliver itself gently while you rest. Before it became a blue icon on every phone screen, before the likes, the stories, the scrolling, Facebook began with something quiet. A name, a photo, connection. It was February 2004. Harvard University. Snow still rested on windowsills. The nights were long, the air sharp. Inside a dorm room, a 19-year-old student typed with focus and intention. His name was Mark Zuckerberg. He had an idea, a way for students to find and connect with each other. Names, faces, shared classes, mutual friends, a living yearbook. He called it the Facebook. It spread fast, from one dorm to another, from Harvard to Yale, then Columbia, then Stanford. There was something simple and powerful about seeing people. Not just names, not just emails, but faces, photos, profiles. It turned the internet into something more human. Zuckerberg and a small group of friends moved to Palo Alto. They rented a house. They built and iterated, line by line, day by day. Investors began to notice. The "they" was dropped. Just Facebook now. And soon it was everywhere. No longer limited to students. Anyone could join. Anyone could create a profile, add a friend, post a thought, share a moment. It didn't shout. It didn't entertain. Connected. That was its power. Facebook wasn't a place you visited. It was a place you lived. Your photos, your thoughts, your memories, and the memories of others. The timeline was born. A stream of lives, flowing together, scrolling endlessly, softly, like a river of attention. And in that river, people found each other. Old classmates, lost cousins, new loves. You didn't have to reach out. You just posted and waited. The likes would come, the comments, the quiet affirmation. You were seen. As Facebook grew, the world around it changed. What began as a college network quietly became a mirror, a reflection of life, captured in fragments. A birthday wish, a vacation photo, passing thought typed late at night. People weren't just using Facebook. They were archiving themselves within it. Their likes, their friends, their digital presence. And Facebook watched, learned, adapted. The news feed was born. No longer did you have to visit profiles one by one. Now the stories came to you, fresh, constant, personalized. It felt organic, like a living pulse of the people you cared about. But behind the calm surface, algorithms stirred. They learned what you clicked, what you paused on, what made you smile, what made you stay. And the feed responded. Not randomly, not equally, but precisely. Facebook knew that attention was fragile and precious, so it worked quietly to hold it. The like button became a symbol, a small gesture that said, "I see you, I hear you, I agree." Then came comments, then shares. A post could ripple through hundreds, thousands, millions, spreading not by force, but by frictionless motion. Information flowed, emotions flowed, and with each click, Facebook became more than a platform. It became a network, massive, invisible, intimate. People reconnected with their pasts, discovered distant relatives, grieved together, celebrated together. For many, Facebook became the town square of the internet, a place not just to scroll but to belong. And all the while, Zuckerberg's vision expanded. Not just connection, but scale. Billions of people, billions of posts, billions of tiny windows into lives unfolding in real time. But connection is not always simple. As Facebook expanded, so did the complexity of what it carried. Not just smiles and reunions, but arguments, rumors, politics, pain. When billions of people speak at once, the world grows louder. And Facebook became the place where much of that noise lived. It did not try to be controversial. It simply showed people what they seem to want. And what people want is not always what is peaceful. In time, questions arose. About influence, about truth, about responsibility. Facebook found itself at the center of conversations it hadn't meant to start. But it listened. It adjusted. It introduced tools to report, to moderate, to filter. It added context, fact-checking, community standards. But the river kept flowing, faster, stronger, and through it all, Facebook continued to build. Messenger let conversations branch off, private, personal, instant. Groups allowed strangers to gather around shared passions. From birdwatching to grief support, from vintage cars to parenting advice. Each one a small village inside the larger city. Then came Instagram, a separate platform, but one that echoed the same hunger. To be seen, to share, to remember. Photos became stories. Stories became reels. Everything sped up, but still it was about connection. Connection through color, through image, through soundless videos late at night. And behind it all, Facebook watched, and learned, and optimized. Some called it manipulation. Others called it personalization. But always it returned to a single promise. To bring people closer. To make the world feel just a little more connected. In 2021, something changed. Facebook became Meta. The name was new, but the intention was familiar. To reach further, to connect deeper, to imagine what might come next. Meta was not just about profiles and posts. It was about presence. Not just what you say, but where you are, and how it feels to be together even when apart. Enter the metaverse. A digital space that wasn't just flat, but three-dimensional, where avatars walked, where hands reached out and touched pixels, where meetings happened around virtual campfires, and games unfolded on surreal landscapes of light. It was strange, exciting, a little dizzying, but for Meta it was the future, a future where your digital self might be as real as your physical one, where home and office, gallery and classroom could all live inside a headset. Meta poured energy into this vision. Hardware, software, interfaces, worlds. And slowly, the edges of what was possible began to shift. But beyond the headsets and buzzwords, one truth remained. Meta, like Facebook before it, was about connection. It still held the photos of a mother's birthday, the message sent across oceans, the memory that popped up after a decade and made someone smile. It still offered space for expression, for discovery, for companionship. Not perfect space, not always peaceful space, but space nonetheless. And sometimes that's enough, because in a world that can feel scattered, to feel seen even briefly is a kind of comfort. So tonight, as you scroll one last time, as you like one more photo, as you read one more comment before bed, know that you're part of something vast. A net cast wide across the world, woven from words and photos, from code and curiosity. A digital village, a luminous mirror, a place where memories rest, and connections wait quietly in the corners of a screen. Let your phone grow quiet now. Let the feed fall still. Close your eyes. The world will still be here tomorrow. And so will the connection. Sleep well, digital dreamer. You are never truly alone. Long before it made smartphones, long before curved screens and folding glass, Samsung began with something far more ordinary. Dried fish, It was 1938. In a small town called Daegu, in what is now South Korea, a man named Lee Byung-chul opened a trading company. He sold groceries, noodles, produce, and dried fish. He named it Samsung, meaning 3 stars in Korean, a name meant to evoke greatness, longevity, power. But there were no phones, no chips, no electronics, only goods and grit. As decades passed, Samsung grew. It moved from trade to textiles, from sugar to insurance. Each step calculated, deliberate. And then, in the late 1960s, the company entered a new world: electronics. It started with black and white televisions, radios, washing machines. Not glamorous, but foundational. Samsung studied, partnered, learned. They didn't move fast, but they moved deeply. By the 1980s, the company began producing semiconductors, tiny slices of silicon, etched with patterns, pulsing with potential. And suddenly, Samsung wasn't just assembling gadgets. It was building their hearts. Chips, memory, displays, the parts other companies relied on. It didn't happen overnight, but piece by piece, Samsung became indispensable. Inside computers, inside cameras, inside phones made by others. And then, one day, it began making its own. In the early 2000s, Samsung phones were not yet iconic. They were practical, functional, often overshadowed by brands like Nokia and Motorola. But Samsung observed, listened, iterated. It didn't chase trends, studied them, and behind the scenes it built something few noticed at the time: mastery of components. Samsung didn't just assemble smartphones. It made the screens, the batteries, the memory, the processors, even the cameras. It was building an ecosystem from the inside out. Then, in 2010, Samsung introduced a new line of phones. They called it Galaxy. At first, it was just one more Android device. But with each generation, the Galaxy became bolder, brighter, sharper. The screens stretched edge to edge. The colors glowed with impossible vibrancy. The cameras captured light in ways once reserved for DSLRs. Samsung wasn't just competing, it was setting the pace. And quietly, something remarkable happened. It became the world's largest smartphone maker. Not with fanfare, not with a single earth-shattering product, but with consistency, craftsmanship, relentless improvement. And while others focused on ecosystem or brand identity, Samsung focused on hardware. The feel of metal, the curve of glass, the silent click of a button, the shimmer of a AMOLED under sunlight. And through it all, the 3 stars still shone. Small, often invisible, but ever present. Not in the sky, but in your hand. As the 2010s unfolded, Samsung stood not just as a manufacturer, but as a maker of experiences. Phones no longer followed. They led. Water resistance, wireless charging, edge displays. Each feature arrived not with a whisper, but with quiet confidence. Useful, sleek, just a little ahead. And then came something no one expected. A fold, glass, bending, a screen that opened like a book, a phone that became a tablet, the familiar, reimagined. The Galaxy Fold was not perfect, but it was a beginning. Samsung dared to dream in layers, in hinges and innovations, in tiny gears that clicked silently beneath a glowing surface. It wasn't just about selling millions. It was about showing what could be possible. Meanwhile, Samsung was expanding in other dimensions. 5G, artificial intelligence, wearables, smart homes. The phone became a remote, a wallet, a key, a medical device, a compass in the palm. And Samsung didn't stop at phones. It made televisions that curved like waves, washing machines that sang when they finished, refrigerators that knew when you were out of milk. It wasn't building gadgets anymore. It was building environments. Seamless, soft, smart. A home that recognized your voice. A screen that adapted to your light. A watch that tracked your sleep as gently as the moon. And through all this, Samsung remained distinctly calm. No dramatic keynotes. No celebrity founders. just focus, precision, delivery. A company that began with dried fish, now shaping the future through pixels, sensors, and patience. Today, Samsung is not just a brand. It is a rhythm. You see it in cities and villages, on subways and mountain trails, in the glint of a camera lens, in the smooth swipe of a curved screen. But you don't always notice it, because Samsung does not demand your attention. It earns it. It is present without pressure, refined without noise. Its devices wake you up, count your steps, translate your words, capture your memories, not loudly, not urgently, just there. And behind that calm utility lies a legacy, a company born in hardship, built with discipline, expanded with precision. It did not arrive on the world stage with fireworks. It grew quietly, carefully, persistently, from noodles to semiconductors, from textiles to televisions, from fish to phones. It stayed close to the work, to the details, to the user, and it dared, when the time was right, to unfold the future. So tonight, as you hold your phone one last time, as your screen dims and your room grows still, know that a story pulses inside that device. A story of stars, of circuits, of people who believed that progress need not shout, can whisper, can bend, can glow, and it can fit quietly in the palm of your hand. Sleep well, digital dreamer. The future waits, folded. Before there were smartphones, before there were laptops, before the internet found its voice, there was a chip, and behind that chip there was Intel. A beginning in silence. The year was 1968. The world outside was full of chaos. Protests on college campuses, rockets in the sky, revolutions in the streets. But in a quiet corner of Mountain View, California, two men were dreaming not of grandeur, but of something smaller, much smaller. Robert Noyce, a physicist who had co-invented the integrated circuit. Gordon Moore, a chemist who saw patterns others couldn't. They had left Fairchild Semiconductor behind, disappointed by management, yearning for freedom. They envisioned a company where engineers led the way, where invention wasn't boxed in, where silicon wasn't just sand, but the future. Together, they founded Intel, short for Integrated Electronics. They started with memory, RAM, faster, smaller, more reliable than anything before. It was humble work, but it was just the beginning. 2. The dawn of intelligence. In 1971, Intel released something that would quietly transform the world. A tiny chip, no bigger than a fingernail. The Intel 4004, the world's first commercially available microprocessor. It had begun as a contract job, a calculator for a Japanese company. But what Intel gave them was more than just a calculator chip. It was a full CPU shrunk to a single piece of silicon. All the logic of a computer, all the potential of a machine, in something smaller than a paperclip. The world didn't scream when the 4004 was born, but it listened, and then it changed. Suddenly, machines didn't need to be huge. They could be compact, personal, powerful. Intel hadn't just sold a chip. They had sold the idea of programmability, a new kind of flexibility, a new kind of freedom. 3. The steps of progress. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Intel released processors that quietly marched toward the future. The 8008, 1972. The 8080, 1974. The 8086, 1978. Foundational, chosen by IBM. The 286 with advanced memory management. The 386 enabling true multitasking. The 486, blending speed with elegance. Each chip was faster, each more capable, each a brick in the foundation of the digital world. And yet, you didn't see them. Not really. They lived inside beige boxes, hummed softly beneath plastic cases. But inside those cases, something was thinking. Something was learning. Something was making your cursor move just a little faster. 4. Intel inside the invisible revolution. In the 1990s, Intel did something radical. They didn't just make chips. They made a brand. The Pentium was born, a name that sounded like it belonged to the future, not just a number, an identity, and with it came a campaign. Intel Inside. 3 syllables. A 5-note jingle. A sticker barely an inch wide. But that sticker became a promise. You didn't have to know how CPUs worked. You didn't need to count clock cycles or read specs. If your machine had Intel inside, you could trust it. Parents saw it. Teachers, gamers, dreamers, and the Pentium lived inside millions of machines. Then came Pentium 2, Pentium 3, Pentium 4. With each release, software ran smoother. Games looked richer. The future came closer. Intel had become more than a company. It had become a pulse, invisible but vital. 5. The silent cathedrals. Behind every chip there was a process. Precision. Place. Intel's fabs, short for fabrication plants, were masterpieces of cleanliness and control. Air filtered thousands of times per hour. Machines that etched circuits smaller than dust. Robots that moved wafers with gentle grace. Every chip was a mosaic. Every transistor, placed with care, etched with light. And over all of this, a quiet principle whispered its truth. Moore's Law. In 1965, Gordon Moore predicted that the number of transistors on a chip would double every 2 years. Not a law of nature, just an observation. But for decades it held. Because Intel made it so. Smaller, faster, cheaper. Not by accident, but by relentless refinement. 6. The world shrinks again. The 2000s brought more change. Desktops gave way to laptops. Wi-Fi replaced tangled cables. Phones became smart. The internet became air. Intel kept adapting. They launched the Core series, i3, i5, i7, then i9. Turbo boost, hyper-threading, virtualization. Transistors dropped to 45 nm. Then 32, 22, 14, shrinking past the width of a DNA strand. Intel chips powered the web, the workplace, the weekend. And yet, a storm was coming. 7. ARM and the age of mobile. Intel had built the backbone of computing, but it had missed a shift. Phones and tablets weren't just gadgets anymore. They were lifelines. And Intel's chips, powerful, yes, were too hot, too big, too thirsty. Competitors embraced ARM architecture, lean, efficient, perfect for the mobile world. Intel tried. They built Atom processors for netbooks and mobile devices. They invested in modems, tried partnerships, launched new initiatives. But they were late, and the world was already moving. 8. Shifting to the cloud. So Intel turned elsewhere. To servers, to cloud computing, to Xeon chips that powered Google searches, Amazon purchases, and Netflix streams. While smartphones ran on ARM, Intel ran the infrastructure. It wasn't flashy, but it was essential. Intel processors helped simulate weather, predict pandemics, render movies, map galaxies. They weren't always in your hand, but they were always behind the curtain. 9. A time for reinvention. By the late 2010s, challenges grew louder. AMD had risen again with efficient, multi-core Ryzen chips. Apple shifted to its own silicon. TSMC was now leading in fabrication scale. Intel stumbled, delays in 10 nanometers, missed deadlines, market share loss. But even giants can learn. And Intel began to change. New leadership, new strategy, new focus. They invested billions in new fabs in the US, in Europe. They created IDM 2.0, a plan to regain fabrication leadership. They opened to making chips for others, not just themselves. And beyond silicon, they looked to new frontiers. Quantum computing, neuromorphic processing, graphene photonics, AI at the edge. Intel wasn't giving up. It was transforming. 10. Still inside. Today, Intel is still here. You may not see it. You may not hear it. But it's there. Inside the server that sends your messages. Inside the camera that secures your home. Inside the lab that analyzes DNA. Inside the rover that explores another world. It doesn't beep. It doesn't glow. But it works. And it thinks. And even now, as you drift into sleep, as your screen fades and your thoughts soften, Intel is still working. The chip inside hums gently, counts, it moves, protects, keeps the rhythm of a world that never quite stops. It is the heartbeat in silicon. So sleep now, digital dreamer. The processors will keep watch. The systems will stay warm. The quiet pulse continues. And when you wake, the world will still be here, faster, safer, more connected, because somewhere, under layers of plastic and glass, inside copper traces and nanometer transistors, Intel is still inside. 11. Beyond the desktop, a world of chips. Computers no longer sit quietly on desks. They move, they follow us, they speak. They are in cars that drive themselves, in drones that deliver packages, in watches that monitor your heartbeat. And in this new world of edge computing and ambient intelligence, Intel is replanting its roots. It's no longer enough to build for general purpose. Today's world demands specificity, tailored architectures, custom silicon. So Intel has expanded. They now build AI accelerators, chips designed for deep learning, for inference, for massive parallel processing. They create FPGAs, flexible chips that can be reshaped by software, adapting in real time. They design network chips, vision processors, 5G modules, hardware that listens, responds, learns. They are entering cars, not with combustion, but with autonomy. Partnering with Mobileye, Intel powers cameras that see, analyze, decide. In cities, in highways, in unknown corners of the world, these chips don't just compute. They navigate, and beneath them all, data. Data that flows, floods, never sleeps. Intel builds the dams, the rivers, the engines that carry this flood, across clouds, across oceans, across time zones. 12. The race for the smallest. Transistors are now measured in nanometers. Not the thousands of them that fit on a chip, but the billions, billions of transistors packed into silicon the size of a fingernail. From 10 nm to 7 to 5 to Intel 4, Intel 3, 20A, 18A, each name representing not just scale, but possibility. And yet, physics pushes back. Electrons rebel. Heat rises. Materials strain. So Intel adapts. They explore new geometries, ribbon FETs, power via. They rethink power delivery, channel width, heat dissipation. They innovate not just with hardware, but with materials. Carbon, gallium, indium. And they know the smallest isn't always the fastest. It's the smartest balance of architecture, efficiency, and design. 13. Intel Foundry building for the world. For decades, Intel made chips only for itself. But today, it builds for others. Like TSMC, Intel now operates as a foundry, a builder of dreams. Startups, enterprises, national governments, all seeking independence, all seeking scale, all seeking silicon. And Intel offers not just factories but a process, a platform for collaboration, a bridge between design and creation, with fabs in Oregon, in Arizona, in Ohio, and across Europe. They are no longer just a chip maker. They are infrastructure. They are sovereignty. They are a safety net for the digital world. 14. Quantum horizons. Somewhere in a quiet lab, far from the buzz of fabs and factories, Intel is working on something different, not faster, not smaller, but stranger. Quantum computing, where bits are no longer just 0 or 1, but both, where particles entangle, where computation leaps beyond classical bounds. Intel is building quantum chips, stable, scalable, chilled to near absolute zero. They are not ready yet, not for your laptop, not for your pocket, but one day they might simulate molecules. They might discover new medicines. They might solve problems we cannot even write today. They are the edge of dreaming. 15. A culture of thinking. Beyond products, Intel is people. Engineers, scientists, architects, designers. In every hallway of their campuses, there's a whisper of history and a hum of curiosity. They train generations. They partner with universities. They fund research. They mentor startups. They write open source code. They teach ethics in AI. They question what it means to compute with responsibility. Because Intel isn't just building chips. They are building the future. 16. In the background, always. Not every machine has an Intel sticker now. The market has changed. The players have multiplied. But Intel remains. In banks that calculate your balance. In planes that chart their routes. In hospitals that scan your heart. They are not loud. They do not need to be. Like breath. Like heartbeat. They are there. 17. Nightfall in silicon. And now, digital dreamer. As your screen grows dim, and the cursor stops blinking, know this, beneath every app, every message, every click, there is a story told in electrons, in gates, in logic, a story begun in 1968 by two men with a belief in silicon, a story whispered through circuits, etched in wafers, shaped by time. Intel is not just a company, it is a rhythm, a soft, steady rhythm that powers your thoughts, guards your memories, guides your voice across the clouds. So sleep well, close your eyes, let your mind drift, let the silicon hum carry you. The chip will keep working, the servers will keep standing, the signals will keep flowing. You may sleep, but the world of thought does not. Intel is still inside, and the dreaming never ends. Before touchscreens, before swipes and selfies, before the app stores and algorithms, there was a ringtone, a simple melody, a cascade of digital notes, bright, cheerful, ubiquitous, came from a phone that wasn't smart, but it was unforgettable. Its name was Nokia, and for a time it wasn't just a brand, it was the phone. But Nokia's story begins long before it lit up in your palm. The year was 1865. In the forests of southern Finland, beside the Nokianverta River, a man named Frederick Idestam opened a pulp mill. It made paper. Trees were cut. Logs were soaked. Fibers pressed into sheets. Communication, then, meant ink and page. Decades passed. The company grew, merged, evolved, from paper to rubber, from rubber to cables, from cables to electronics. By the 1960s, Nokia was making televisions, radios. By the 1980s, it was making networks, infrastructure, the silent grid that connected nations. Then came the moment everything changed. The wireless age. Radio signals replaced wires, and communication became mobile. Nokia was ready. In 1987, it launched one of the world's first handheld mobile phones. It was large, heavy, but it worked, and that mattered, because the world was ready too. Businessmen, travelers, engineers, they didn't want to be tied to desks anymore. They wanted to move and talk, and Nokia helped them do both, quietly, reliably, simply, and so the rise began. By the mid-1990s, Nokia had become something special. Not flashy, not luxurious, but trusted. Phones with small screens and big buttons, antennas that extended, batteries that lasted for days. You could drop them, you could lose them and find them years later, still working. They were tools, not toys. And everywhere you looked, people were using them. In offices, on farms, at train stations, in schools, for calls, for text messages, short, clipped, and carefully typed with thumbs. It was a new form of conversation. Brief, efficient, portable, and through it all, Nokia kept refining, making devices smaller, lighter, stronger. And then came the Nokia 3310, a phone so iconic it became a legend. Sturdy, affordable, friendly, came in soft colors. Its buttons clicked with quiet confidence. Its battery lasted for days, sometimes longer. And inside it, something simple, Snake, a game of pixels and movement, of eating and growing and never hitting the wall. Millions played it, on buses, in waiting rooms, before bed. It was calm, addictive, timeless. The 3310 wasn't just a phone. It was a companion, and Nokia was everywhere. By the early 2000s, Nokia controlled over 40% of the world's mobile phone market. That's not a statistic. That's a presence. One company, in the hands of billions. No matter where you were in the world, city or countryside, beach or border, chances were a Nokia had been there. They didn't need fancy marketing, just reliability, design that made sense, a sense of belonging in the hand. It was global, but it felt local, and always that little ringtone, a cheerful hello, a reminder you were connected. Then, the world shifted. In 2007, a man in a black turtleneck held up a rectangle of glass. A phone with no buttons, no antenna, just a screen, an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. The crowd gasped, and the iPhone arrived. First, Nokia didn't blink. It had seen competitors before. It had weathered storms. It still held the market, still shipped millions. But something subtle was happening. People began touching their phones, not just pressing them. They swiped, zoomed, pinched. They opened maps with their fingers. They typed on glass. It was less about communication, more about experience. Nokia's phones still worked beautifully. They still lasted forever. But they began to feel silent. The world had grown louder, faster, more fluid. App stores bloomed. Developers built ecosystems. Photos became filters. Status updates became scrolls. And slowly the world moved on. Nokia tried to catch up. It built touchscreens. It launched new operating systems. Partnered, restructured, reimagined. But it was chasing something that had already evolved. By the time it reached for innovation, the moment had passed. It wasn't failure. It was momentum lost. A tide that had turned gently at first, then all at once. In 2014, Microsoft acquired Nokia's mobile phone business. The brand remained for a while, but the rhythm had changed. The ringtone faded. The buttons disappeared. Snake curled up and went to sleep. And the phone that once ruled the world stepped back. Not in shame, not in defeat, but in quiet dignity, like a candle that had burned brightly and simply reached the end of its wax. Today, Nokia is no longer the giant it once was, but it hasn't disappeared. It builds networks now, fiber, towers, infrastructure, the quiet bones of modern connection. It no longer sits in your pocket, but it helps your signal reach you. It hums behind the scenes, faithful, steady, essential. And for some, it never left. The 3310 in a drawer, still functional, still charged, still waiting, or maybe, just maybe, still playing Snake. There is something timeless about a device that simply works. No updates, no notifications, no distractions, just a call, a message, a moment, and a ringtone, still echoing in memory. Those who once held Nokias in their hands remember the feel of the buttons under your thumb, the way the screen glowed green in the dark, the joy of a high score, the peace of knowing the battery would last. It wasn't just a phone. It was a companion, a sturdy bridge across voices and miles. In its simplicity, it offered something rare: focus, reliability, silence. Not everything needs to be fast, or smart, or endlessly updated. Some things just need to be there. And Nokia was. Connected families, saved lives, built memories, without fanfare, without noise. And yet, the story isn't over. Because stories don't end when the headlines fade. They shift, they settle, they begin again, quietly, differently. Nokia's logo still glows, no longer in palms, but on cell towers, on servers, on infrastructure that spans continents. It no longer tries to lead the smartphone race. Instead, it builds the roads beneath the race. Fiber optic cables, 5G networks, enterprise systems, solutions that hum beneath cities, hospitals, classrooms, satellites. It has returned to its roots, where communication is not flashy, but foundational. And maybe that was always its nature, not to dazzle, but to endure, not to shout, but to serve. And sometimes, in the quiet corners of the world, Nokia phones still ring. In rural clinics where smartphones fail but the 2G signal holds. In refugee camps where simplicity means survival. In mountaintop outposts where one call can save a life. The legacy lingers not in headlines but in function. Not in megapixels but in moments. A missed call from your mother. A message that made you smile. A memory stored in a green and black screen. And in drawers across the world, there they are. Tough, scratched, waiting. A 1100. A 3310. A 6600 with its soft curves and deep clicks. A Lumia, glowing faintly with its final charge. Devices that don't update. They remember, because that's what Nokia truly gave us. Not just phones, but a relationship with connection itself. It reminded us that to communicate is to be human. That to hear a voice across oceans is a kind of magic. That a ringtone in the dark is more than sound. It's reassurance. And yes, we've moved on. We swipe now. We stream. We FaceTime, post, pin, scroll. But sometimes, we long for the stillness. For a day when the battery didn't need checking. When your phone didn't ask you to update. When your attention wasn't pulled by flashing icons. When your device was quiet unless it truly mattered. Perhaps that's what Nokia gave us most. A kind of peace. A conversation unburdened by filters. A text with no typing indicators. A call with no background noise, no emoji, no distractions. Just a ringtone. Just a voice. Just a moment. And perhaps one day it will rise again. Not to reclaim the smartphone throne, but to remind the world that connection can be simple again. That not everything needs to scroll. That not every device needs to speak. That stillness is a feature worth designing for. And until then, it builds in the background, in the clouds, in the cables, in the quiet. So tonight, listen. Not to the hum of your modern phone. Not to the vibration of another notification. But to memory, to that high-pitched, happy little tone. The digital chirp of a simpler age. Let it echo softly, like a lullaby from your past. You knew it by heart. Told you someone was calling. That you were not alone. Sleep now, digital dreamer. Let the lights dim. Let the icons fade. Let the world turn gently without you for a while. And know that somewhere, far off, quiet, invisible, the signal still pulses. The towers still stand. The frequencies still carry whispers across the air. Because even now, even without buttons or snake, even without headlines or hype, before screens stretched edge to edge, before phones shimmered like glass and bent like paper, there were keys. Small, precise, tactile. A full keyboard beneath your thumbs, clicking softly with each word. A feeling of control, of certainty, and above those keys a glowing red light. When it blinked, something awaited you. A message, a moment, a world. This was BlackBerry. But it didn't start with a phone. In the 1980s, in Waterloo, Ontario, two engineers were building something else entirely. Mike Lazaridis and Douglas Fregin founded a small tech company called Research in Motion RIM. They focused on wireless data, on paging, on possibilities. The idea was simple but bold. What if you could talk to data? Not just receive it, not just store it, but send it, wirelessly, seamlessly, securely. Their breakthrough came not from a screen, but from email. The BlackBerry didn't begin as a phone. It began as a messenger, a secure, mobile portal to your inbox. No mouse, no wires, just a blinking light and a satisfying click. At first, only the powerful had them. Executives, lawyers, government officials. They wore them on belts, held them like treasure, checked them religiously, and soon they had a name, Crackberry, because people couldn't put them down. By the early 2000s, BlackBerry was no longer just a tool. It was a symbol, a badge of responsibility, a signal that you were needed, that messages followed you wherever you went. Not social media, not games, just email, pure, focused, urgent. CEOs typed on it mid-meeting. Journalists filed stories from airports. Politicians sent messages from secure tunnels. Even world leaders carried one. BlackBerry didn't just live in pockets, it lived in policy. The devices were small, squared, elegant in a quiet way, not playful, not decorative, but purposeful. There was a rhythm to using one. Thumbs flying over miniature keys, the screen scrolling through threads of conversation. It was fast, precise, empowering. You didn't waste time. You handled business. And the red light, that tiny pulse, it became a heartbeat for the always-on professional. You could feel it even before it blinked, like the whisper of a message already forming in the ether. RIM expanded fast. The BlackBerry became essential to enterprise, to diplomacy, to security. Its encryption was legendary. Its network reliable. Its reputation impeccable. It wasn't just about the phone. It was about the ecosystem. BlackBerry Enterprise Server, BlackBerry Messenger, the sealed, secure tunnel through which data flowed cleanly. No noise, no nonsense, just information delivered with confidence. Then the silence was broken. In 2007, the world turned its eyes to a black rectangle of glass. It had no keyboard, no blinking red light, no belt clip, just a screen and a promise. The iPhone. First, BlackBerry didn't flinch. The keyboard was still faster, the network more secure. Their market, corporate, loyal, was steady. But the world outside was shifting. People wanted more than email. They wanted photos, videos, maps, music. And slowly expectation changed. Communication became visual. Touch replaced type. Fun replaced formality. The blinking red light was no longer enough. BlackBerry tried to adapt. It launched touchscreens, hybrid designs, an app store, a new operating system. But change was hard. The things that once made it great, security, control, discipline, now slowed it down. Meanwhile, Apple and Android ran ahead. They let developers build, let users play, let creativity grow wild. BlackBerry remained structured, safe, efficient. But in a world chasing delight, efficiency was no longer exciting. Market share slipped, then tumbled. The name faded from headlines. The red light blinked less and less. And slowly the keyboards went quiet. Today, BlackBerry still exists, but not in your hand. Its phones are gone. The hardware business sold. The keyboards retired. But the company lives on in software, in security, in silence. Protects data now. Manages fleets. Secures hospitals, cars, factories. Still serious. Still precise. Still BlackBerry. But for many, the name lives not in products, but in memory, a vibration in a meeting, a red light in the dark, the soft click of a perfectly shaped key beneath your thumb. It was a tool for the focused, a shield for the professional, a compass for the connected. You didn't show off your BlackBerry. You got things done with it. It never asked for attention, but it always got it. And in that stillness, in that discipline, there was beauty. Because sometimes the most powerful technology isn't the flashiest. It's the one that disappears into your routine, into your rhythm, into your life. So tonight, as you unplug, as your devices dim and your fingers still, you might remember a screen just big enough, a keyboard that fit your hands, a world where every message came with intention, where communication was compact, precise, earned, and in that memory, a glow, a light, a quiet legacy. Sleep well, digital dreamer. The messages can wait. The light will not blink tonight, but somewhere, a keystroke still echoes. Soft, certain, BlackBerry. Before the world was wireless, before entertainment lived in the cloud, there was a hiss, a click, and a soft whirring of tape. This was Sony, a name that didn't shout, but gently tuned the future. Its story begins in the ashes. Tokyo, 1946. The city was quiet, not with peace, but with exhaustion. World War II had ended. Buildings were broken, spirits bruised. But inside a small building with a tin roof, two men had an idea. Masaru Ibuka, an engineer. Akio Morita, a physicist. Together, they formed a company with a simple dream: to make things that made life better. Not just useful, but joyful. They named it Tokyo Tsushin Kogyo, Tokyo Telecommunications Engineering Corporation. But in time, it would become Sony. A name short, soft, global, inspired by the Latin word sonus, meaning sound, and the English word sunny, youthful, bright, full of promise. Their first inventions were modest: a rice cooker that didn't quite cook rice, a tape recorder made from scraps and soldiers' uniforms. But behind each device was a philosophy: craft with care, dream with clarity, design with feeling. And slowly the world began to listen. By the 1950s and 60s, Sony was no longer just a post-war experiment. It had become a voice. Its radios, tiny, portable, personal, brought music into new places, onto trains, into hands, into pockets. No longer tethered to a living room or kitchen counter. Sound was free, and with freedom came intimacy. Then came Trinitron, a television like no other. Colors brighter, lines sharper, images that pulsed with life. It won awards, hearts. It made families gather closer, made movies more than motion, made them feeling. Sony didn't just build devices. It shaped how we experienced them. And then, one day in 1979, they changed the world again. The Walkman, a small box, pair of headphones, and suddenly music was yours alone. Not shared, not ambient, but internal. The world moved around you, and the soundtrack came from your pocket. Cassettes clicked, spools turned, voices whispered directly into your ears. You could walk, breathe, feel, and no one else had to know what you were listening to. The Walkman wasn't just a product. It was a shift, a moment of private emotion inside a public space. And people embraced it, not just as a gadget, but as a companion. Then came discs, then DVDs, then digital cameras. Sony led the transitions gently, reliably. Pixels replaced film, lasers replaced magnets, and always the experience stayed pure. Then, in 1994, came something unexpected. A new kind of dream: PlayStation. The PlayStation arrived like a quiet revolution. It wasn't the first game console, but it felt like something new, sleek, gray, with a disc tray that opened like a secret door. It whispered possibility, and when you turned it on, that sound, a warm, swelling chord, a soft pulse, a glow of light, like entering a dream. The games it brought weren't just distractions. They were worlds, stories you could move through, characters you could feel for, journeys that unfolded one button at a time. Final Fantasy, Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo, Crash Bandicoot, names that became memories. And the controller fit like it was made for your hands. Buttons placed just right, movement that felt natural, moments that felt real. Sony didn't just let you play, it invited you in, and PlayStation became home. More than a console, more than a brand, it became a feeling. In dorm rooms, living rooms, bedrooms, basements, the PlayStation was a part of growing up. For millions. And Sony didn't stop. PlayStation 2, then 3, then 4, each more refined, more powerful, but always with the same care. Each generation held onto that feeling, that when you pressed the power button, you were stepping into something personal. Not loud, not flashy, just right. And in the background of all this, Sony kept listening. To sound, to sight, to soul. Always balancing technology with tenderness, precision with emotion, because they never forgot. Product is not just a thing, it's a companion. Today, Sony is everywhere, but never overwhelming. It lives in your living room, on your wrist, inside your headphones, across your memories. Its name is stitched into speakers and sensors and screens. Yet it remains quiet, measured, patient. Sony has never tried to be everything, only something meaningful. Its televisions still shimmer with color. Its lenses still capture beauty. Its consoles still welcome stories. And behind each product, there is a whisper. How will this make you feel? Because Sony understands something rare, that people don't remember specifications. They remember moments. The first song in a new city, the first game that made you cry, the blurry photo of someone you no longer see, taken on a camera now tucked in a drawer. That drawer might hold more than technology. It might hold time, because Sony is part of that too. The rhythm of turning a cassette, the warmth of CRT glow, the softness of headphone foam, the startup chime of a world waiting behind a blue logo. It was never just about innovation. It was about invitation, to feel, to listen, to play, to remember. And so tonight, as you drift into sleep, let those memories wrap around you, like a favorite song, like a screen fading to black, like the sound of a disc spinning slowly to stillness. Sony still hums, somewhere waiting, for the next story, the next sound, the next dream. Sleep well, digital dreamer. You've listened enough for today.